Then sign this, she continued, presenting a divorce document that she had personally signed. With a loud laugh, she continued, "Goodbye, loser, and I'll be requesting alimony too." "Fine by me," I said, attempting to maintain my composure. "You do know there's an inheritance from my father, right?" My uncle told me, "Let's start the inheritance process first," which left me speechless. I was astounded at my modest father's fortune. "Really? How much are we discussing?" Curious but unprepared for the startling response, I inquired. "The assets are worth about $500 million, he stated. "My name is Ben Stokes. I'm a 45-year-old average office worker. I got married 8 years ago, right after I was promoted to manager. Our office romance turned into a wedding that our colleagues celebrated with us. I spent all my savings on a grand ceremony. I still remember how beautiful and happy she looked that day. She was the star of our department from the moment she joined. Not because she was the best at her job, she was actually a bit clumsy, but because she was always cheerful and hardworking. I admired her from a distance, never imagining she'd notice me. Working together on a project brought us closer. After gathering enough courage, I confessed my feelings to her. She blushed and nodded, agreeing to give us a chance. We dated for a few years, and when I got promoted, I proposed. "I'm so happy," she said when I asked her to marry me. "I spent 4 months of my salary on an expensive Alexandrite ring. She was moved and promised to never take it off. I was completely in love with her and swore to always take care of her. She wanted to be a housewife, saying we needed a nice home to settle down. Her smile was enough to convince me. We searched for properties together and eventually bought a luxurious apartment. Then we went on the overseas honeymoon she had always wanted. By the end of it, my savings were nearly gone, but I wasn't worried. My stable job would help us live comfortably. We started saving again, hoping to plan for children in the future. I dreamed of a happy, peaceful life, coming home to my wife and one day to our kids. Losing my parents at a young age had made me long for a family of my own. Back then, I was excited about everything, marrying the woman I loved, securing a beautiful home, and dreaming of the future we'd share together. I never thought it would all turn out like this. I never thought things would end up like this. The dream of a happy family life was completely broken just a few years after our marriage. Camille was a stunning woman, glamorous and full of charm. She loved dressing in flashy outfits, and walking beside her made me proud. But that feeling didn't last long. It faded as soon as the honeymoon phase and early days of our marriage were over. At first, even the smallest gifts would make her happy. But after 8 years, she changed completely. She used to greet me warmly when I came home, but now I often returned to a dark, silent house with the door locked. The messy living room only made me feel worse. Reluctantly, I would tidy up a bit, change out of my suit, and head to the kitchen. The kitchen was always spotless because no one used it. Of course, there were no meals prepared. When I opened the fridge, I saw it was full of beer and barely any real food. I had no choice but to grab one of the instant noodles I had stocked up on and boil water in the kettle. I don't drink, so the beer was all Camille's. She used to try cooking even though she wasn't very good at it. Back then, I found her efforts admirable, but over time she lost interest in cooking altogether and suggested we eat out instead. With both of us working, I thought it was reasonable and agreed. However, Camille wasn't happy with eating at simple family restaurants or diners nearby. She always pushed for more expensive places. When I told her we couldn't afford to dine at fancy restaurants every night, she looked at me with a hardened expression. "Why don't you have the means?" she asked coldly. If she didn't want to cook, I would have been fine with supermarket deli food or simple meals at family restaurants. But she demanded upscale places, restaurants we used to visit only for special occasions. I simply didn't earn enough for that kind of lifestyle. Was I really so lacking? I thought I made enough for a modestly comfortable life. But since we got married, her demands and spending kept increasing. Tonight she was probably out having fun again. Frustrated by her absence, I went to bed exhausted. She came home just before I had to leave for work the next morning. Her late nights became a regular thing. She'd leave the house dressed up and return just as I was heading out. She brushed past me without a word, muttering, "Move, you're in the way." I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I just sighed and quietly said, "I'm off," but she didn't respond. Then one day I was shocked to find a credit card bill that would change everything. I didn't recognize the bill. It was for several thousand. It turned out Camille had likely opened the credit card in my name without telling me. Frustrated, I called the credit card company to report the unauthorized charges. But because we were married, they said there was nothing they could do to reduce the charges. All I could do was block the card to prevent further use. When I looked at the detailed charges, I noticed a lot of money had been spent at the same store. Worried about what might be happening, I decided to hire a lawyer and a private investigator to find out the truth. What they uncovered was shocking. Camille had been spending her nights at nightclubs and showering money on her favorite dancer. I couldn't believe it. The money I worked so hard for, the money I thought was supporting our life together, was being wasted on another man. I couldn't ignore this any longer. I took some time off work and waited at home for Camille to come back. It was time to face the truth I'd been avoiding. Camille woke up past noon and seemed annoyed to see me there. She frowned. "Why are you here?" "It's my house. Why wouldn't I be here?" I replied calmly. She sneered. "Oh, the house is mine now. I changed the deed, didn't I tell you?" Her laughter had none of the warmth I once loved. It was cold and cruel, coming from a completely different person and the one I had married. "I want to talk. Can you sit down?" I said. "Now you want to talk." "Fine, I guess I can listen," she replied, sitting across from me with obvious reluctance. "You opened credit cards in my name without telling me. How much did you spend?" I asked. "I don't remember," she said carelessly. "I threw them away once they were blocked." She spoke as if it was no big deal, like throwing out trash. "And the nightclub visits?" I pressed. "Oh, you finally noticed," she said with a smirk. "I've been going since before we got married." "What? What do you mean?" I asked, confused. She seemed amused by my reaction. "Oh, he's a dancer. He became one on his own," she said, which annoyed me. "So I started dating you instead." I was stunned. She continued, her words cutting deeper. "You were boring, but you were good at spending money, so I thought it was fine." Then, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, she began talking about Nick as though she were a love-struck teenager. "But Nick came back to me. He's aiming to be the top dancer now, and his salary is amazing." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She talked about Nick like I didn't exist, completely ignoring my feelings. "So I thought I'd help him reach the top. That takes money, you know. It can't be helped," she said casually. "Don't tell me you sold this house too?" I asked, horrified. "Of course not. I'm planning to live here with Nick soon," she replied, as if that was a perfectly reasonable thing to say. Her words left me utterly confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I've already changed the deed. I want to live here with Nick. You're in the way. You're off work today, right? Pack your things and leave," she said coldly. Then, without another word, she went back to the bedroom, leaving me sitting there, stunned and in complete disbelief. I couldn't think straight anymore. Without much thought, I started packing my things and left the house. It was pouring rain, but I didn't care. I wandered aimlessly, drinking alcohol I couldn't handle. When I finally came to, I found myself staring at a white ceiling. "Where am I?" I asked groggily. "Don't you remember? You collapsed from alcohol poisoning in the rain and were brought here. You've also developed pneumonia," she explained gently. I felt terrible hearing this. Apparently, I had drunk so much that I blacked out and collapsed on the street. Being soaked in the rain had caused pneumonia. "You've been asleep for 5 days?" Erica added. 5 days? That's just. "Yes, your workplace even called a few times," she said. "The stress must have finally caught up with you." "Oh, it looks like you have visitors," Erica said before stepping aside. To my surprise, Camille walked in with a man I didn't recognize. He was well-dressed, with blonde hair and a flashy suit. I guessed he was the dancer Camille had mentioned before. "Look who's alive," Camille said with a mocking smile. "I was starting to think I'd get some insurance money." Her words sent a chill down my spine. How much life insurance had she taken out on me? "Oh, and by the way, I threw away all the stuff you left in the room," she added casually. I didn't have much to begin with, so it didn't matter anymore. The few things I had taken with me were enough. Then she pulled out a document. "Sign this," she said, holding out divorce papers she had already signed herself. Laughing in a high-pitched voice, she added, "Goodbye, loser. I'll be demanding alimony, too." I didn't have the energy to argue. Feeling completely drained, I signed the papers and handed them back to her. Camille's face lit up with satisfaction as she took the documents and left with her lover. At that moment, I didn't care about anything anymore. I collapsed back onto the bed and fell asleep. In the days that followed, 2 unexpected visitors came to see me. The first was a police officer. "Do you remember if anyone pushed you?" he asked. I shook my head, confused. "No, I don't remember anything," I replied. The officer looked puzzled and left without explaining further. The second visitor was a middle-aged man in a sharp suit. I didn't know who he was, but he seemed strangely interested in my past. "I don't have much of a past to tell," I said honestly. "I lost my parents in an accident when I was a child. After that, I grew up in foster care. Most of the foster homes were awful, and I don't have many good memories from that time. After finishing high school, I left the foster system, took a gap year to save money, and eventually went to college." As I shared my story, the man in front of me started to tear up. Confused, I asked, "Excuse me, but who are you?" He wiped his eyes and said, "I'm sorry for not introducing myself earlier. My name is Owen Haar. I'm your father's brother. Your uncle." Uncle? I had never known I had any relatives. I always believed I was alone since no one ever came to find me. Owen explained, "Your parents married against the wishes of the family. Back then, your grandfather was furious. He completely disowned your parents, even removing your father from the family registry. But as time passed, your grandfather's anger faded. One day, he received a letter and a photo from your father. The letter said, 'You have a grandson.' That made him want to reconcile with your parents. He began searching for them, but by the time he found out where they were, the news of their death had already reached him. The shock was too much for him, and he fell ill. After that, he hired private detectives to find out about your parents' lives and what had happened to their child. But by then, your parents had been memorialized as having no living relatives, and it wasn't clear where you had been sent. When your name recently came up in our detective agency records, I thought it might be you and had them investigate further. That's how I found you." "So you really are my uncle?" I asked, still trying to process everything. "Yes, that's right. You've been through so much," he said with a kind voice. "From now on, we'll be here to support you." Hearing those words made me want to cry. I had been alone for so long, struggling through everything on my own. It was the first time someone had told me I didn't have to carry the burden alone. I opened up to him, sharing everything about my life, from my marriage to Camille and her betrayal, to the debts I was left with after losing the apartment I worked so hard to buy. I told him how Camille had used me for money from the beginning, treating me as nothing more than a source of income. My uncle listened patiently, then he gently patted my head and said, "You've done well." His warm hand comforted me, and I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. "We'll handle your divorce," he said firmly. "But as much as this is Camille's fault, she's also quite unlucky." "Unlucky? What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "You see, your father had an inheritance, and now it's yours. Let's start the inheritance process," he explained. I was stunned. An inheritance? My father? I never imagined he had any wealth. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, unsure what to expect. My uncle revealed the amount, and I was speechless. "Roughly $500 million, he said. A week later, I returned to work. My colleagues were happy to see me and congratulated me on recovering. They told me they were relieved I was safe. I had worried my coworkers a lot during my absence. When I returned, I told them about my divorce. Their reactions were hard to describe, pity mixed with something unspoken. It made me wonder if they already knew the truth about Camille's behavior. Apparently, rumors about her had spread after our marriage. Everyone had been kind enough not to tell me, but I learned that Camille had been flirting with other male colleagues even while we were married. Some of them felt betrayed when they found out she married me, likely because they thought she chose me for the expensive engagement ring I gave her. At first, seeing me happy and my marriage seemingly going well, they might have thought the rumors weren't true. But the women in the office were less forgiving. "We knew she turned someone into a cash cow," they said. They were aware of her reckless spending and how she had complained about her boyfriend becoming a dancer. Back then, I was too in love and focused on getting married to notice any of this. So no one said anything. Now, there seemed to be a sense of guilt among my colleagues because of the messy divorce I had gone through. "It was my own naivety. No one else is to blame," I said with a smile, trying to lighten the mood. At least I got to meet family I didn't even know I had. The atmosphere in the office softened, and I felt glad to be back at work. After being kicked out of my house, I was now staying in an apartment owned by the Hart family. When I offered to pay rent for the beautiful place, they told me, "This apartment was part of the inheritance meant for your father. You can live here without worrying." Still, I found it hard to believe that such a luxurious apartment could be part of the $500 million inheritance. I was just trying to get my life back to normal after everything that had happened. That's when my phone started ringing. It was Camille. What could she possibly want now? As soon as I answered, her voice burst through the phone. "How could you hide assets from your wife? That's the worst. And why should I have to pay alimony?" she screamed. I was confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "The divorce. You should have just quietly paid the alimony. Why did you start a lawsuit?" she yelled. I had completely forgotten about the legal advice I got from my lawyer with everything going on, my hospitalization and reconnecting with family. I thought the divorce was already finalized when she submitted the papers. "And you said you had no relatives. What the hell? The grandson of the chairman of the Hart conglomerate? You never told me," she shouted. Her ranting made no sense, and I couldn't follow what she was saying. I quietly ended the call and immediately blocked Camille's number. After talking with my uncle, we decided to meet her over the weekend to settle everything. We met in a private room at a restaurant. When I arrived, Camille and her lover were already there, glaring at me. My uncle patted my shoulder and said, "Don't worry. Everything is under control." We sat down across from them to start the discussion, but what was there to talk about? The divorce was already finalized, and I had given up everything. "I did what you wanted," I said. "I divorced you and gave up the house. What more do you want?" "Everything," Camille snapped. "How can someone from the Hart family live so modestly? You're hiding money from me." "What are you talking about?" I replied. I only connected with my uncle after our divorce. But she didn't seem to be listening. "And what about the alimony? Why aren't you paying? And now you're suing me in civil court." I glanced at my uncle. He smiled calmly, clearly confident about how things were being handled. "And what about those credit cards?" I added. "You opened them in my name. Why should I have to pay for them?" "No, you made those cards," she said. "They're in your name, so you're responsible for paying." My uncle spoke up, still smiling. "Regarding those credit cards, Ben didn't make them. They were obtained illegally, even if you were married at the time." "But we were married, so we shared property. That means he still has to pay," Camille protested. Her lover chimed in with a smirk. "Come on, you're rich. Just pay up and let her go. That'll settle everything, right?" I couldn't believe the nerve of him. His words made my head throb, but then my uncle's calm tone changed the mood completely. "Well, in that case, let's address the credit card fraud and marriage scam in criminal court." Camille's lover's grin vanished instantly. "What are you talking about?" he blurted out. "That doesn't change the fact," my uncle continued firmly, "that under the law here, having an affair doesn't mean you avoid paying alimony. And while we might agree to a fair settlement for the divorce, we can't overlook the insurance fraud." "Insurance fraud? What do you mean?" Camille stammered. My uncle turned to me. "Ben, did you know the life insurance policy taken out on you was worth over $5 million? I froze. "What? No, I had no idea." I looked at Camille. She avoided my eyes, staring at the floor as if trying to escape my gaze. "We'll drop the civil lawsuit and agree to a reasonable settlement," my uncle said as he stood up, signaling for me to follow. I stood up and headed for the exit. My uncle turned back to Camille and Nick, leaving them with chilling words. "If we dig into your past, I'm sure we'll find more dirt. We'll be filing this as a criminal case, so be prepared." Then he walked out of the restaurant with me. Things moved quickly after that. My uncle had already prepared everything, so all I needed to do was officially file the lawsuit. Surprisingly, the process went smoother than I expected. We sued Camille and Nick for attempted insurance fraud, along with several other charges. The truth about the insurance was especially terrifying. On the night I was kicked out in the heavy rain, Nick had apparently been following me, although I had no memory of it. It turned out he pushed me down some stairs in a back alley and left after making sure I was unconscious. Doctors later told me that I might not have survived if I hadn't been found in time. The early call to the ambulance was thanks to a Hart family detective who had been keeping an eye on me. The detective gathered clear evidence of Camille's infidelity and investigated Nick's actions. The documents collected by the Hart family also revealed Camille's attempts to work with a court official to take over ownership of the house, as well as their detailed plans for insurance fraud. With all this evidence, it became clear that both Camille and Nick could face real prison time. And so my years of romance and marriage ended in disaster. A few weeks later, I found myself standing in front of a grand American-style house with a magnificent gate. Inside, I finally met my grandfather, Olivier Hart, a well-known investor. It was hard to believe that this man was my grandfather. He was lying in bed, but when he saw me, his face lit up with a warm, nostalgic smile. "Come closer," he said gently. "Let me get a good look at you." I sat down in the chair beside his bed. "I owe your parents an apology," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "If I hadn't opposed their marriage, they might still be with us today." Hearing the sadness in his voice made me realize how much my father had been loved. My parents seemed happy, I said softly, and I'm really happy to have met you, grandfather. Is that so? Is that so? He said, nodding several times as tears filled his eyes. He firmly grasped my hand, holding it as though he didn't want to let go. I made it in time this time, he said. Thank you for being alive. My grandfather's words made me realize how deeply he had mourned my parents' accident, and tears started falling from my eyes too. Yes, I said, my voice trembling. I'm grateful to my parents for bringing me into this world, and to you, grandfather and uncle. My uncle, who was standing beside the bed, gave me a nice look as he heard this, and my grandfather grinned broadly. I also said, Thank you for finding me. I believed that I was the only person in the world. I also failed in my haste to start a family. I have recently, however, located my true family. Nothing could bring me greater joy than this. My family and I are currently leading a great life.